I guess. When my parents moved to Italy, I mean, I was a pretty smart kid, used to be in the first girl in the class, you know, all that stuff. And when my parents moved to Italy, I didn't know a word of Italian. So, and I was plunged from Bronx, New York, into this what I generally call small village with 3,000 inhabitants, including the sheep. So, and there was a complete different framework, and there was also a lot of prejudice on what it meant to be American. And I had a really rough time and whatever. Got made fun of a lot, followed home from school a lot, got picked on a lot. When I went to college, and of course being in a small town and being that I didn't know Italian, I was really easy to call out. I mean, I used to walk down the street and people used to yell at me from the balcony and say, American girl, what you wearing today? You know, stuff like that. And I used to get followed home. So people would call me out on the streets. They knew I was the American girl. I kind of felt like I was a little, everyone's new toy. When I moved to Rome for college. And hey, I'm in a big city, nobody knows me. And by then, 9 years later, my accent was perfect. No one knew I wasn't Italian. No one knew I was American. So, for the first time in my life, I could relate to people on however I decided to relate to them. I could choose to not say I was American. I could just say I was Italian. I also noticed when I introduced myself as American that people tended to treat me differently. They would start pointing out every time I missed a word or I missed a tense, or every time I talked and I made a mistake, people would look down on me and correct it. They never did that if they knew I was Italian. So I started withdrawing the information of me being American to the people who I thought would look down on me because of my being American, who thought they had to teach me Italian because I was American. So anyhow, I'm going to try and make this short. When I got to college, of course I was really sensitive to, I'm studying sociology and they're talking about prejudice and the construction of prejudice and how prejudice comes out of ways of knowing to some extent. And I was really interested in it because I had experienced prejudice. I knew that people in my hometown had a certain opinion of me, and no matter how hard I would, no matter how socially engaged I was, no matter how socially committed I was still considered an individualist, a consumerist, and a bunch of other stuff, and a consumerist because that's what America is. It's individualist, it's consumerist, it's egoistic. So I was considered that way. I knew what prejudice was. At some point, my interest in prejudice, of course, in my classrooms, after they started talking about prejudice, they started talking about racism. And I started thinking, wow. I felt like a little weakling until I was in this small town where I got picked on all the time. And then suddenly, when I was in Rome and I could be Italian and I could, talk real nice and straight and everything, I could be who I wanted to be, and I felt completely free. And I started thinking, what the shit would have happened if the color of my skin had reminded and told every person in Rome that I was not from this country? What would have happened? I would have not had that choice. The fact that I had a choice made a difference for me and made me feel completely free as a person and free from all the prejudice that I had experienced. I think that's when, at that point I don't think I called it privilege, but I think that's when I started realizing, okay, there's something here beyond one-on-one relationship. And then the big hit, I think, was, ironically enough, in a classroom in Britain. I went to study 6 months in Britain on a school program in college. A class called Racism and Inequality in the USA. Every Monday morning at 10 o'clock, my teacher would flip in an Eyes on the Prize video for 2 hours. And as non-progressive as Eyes on the Prize looks to me now, at the time, for at least the first 4 or 5 classes, I had a hard time writing anything on my notebook. because I always say that black people in this country are more sane than white people sometimes. Because African Americans grow up knowing that part of the land of the free, land of the true land of the free, is not the only side of the story. Well, I had believed that story, and the fact that I had left America made me all the more attached to it. For years, I had told myself, I don't want to be in this country. I want to go to America. I'm American. My country's the best that it can be. My country's the best in the world. I don't need to be in Italy. But finding out that how much inequality, how much discrimination, how much oppression existed in America really brought me to terms to who I was and why my life was the way it was in America. I know not everyone's life is the way mine was. My cute little middle-class adolescence sheltered life that I had for a few years.